Most men think power comes from being understood, from explaining their intentions, defending their choices, and proving their worth. But real power begins the moment you stop explaining. Because when you no longer need others to understand you, you become untouchable. Silence replaces validation. Presence replaces persuasion. And people start to feel your certainty, not your sentences. The world stops debating your value because your energy already decided it. The less you explain, the more they feel. And that's when control shifts. Most men grow up believing communication means constant explanation. They think every decision needs justification. Every silence needs a reason. So they talk. They over-explain. They clarify to be liked, to be understood, to be accepted. But what they don't realize is that explanation is a quiet form of insecurity. It's the mind begging to be believed. And belief, when requested, loses power. A Stoic man moves differently. He speaks with clarity, but not commentary. He knows that truth doesn't need a sales pitch. When you explain too much, you teach people to doubt you. You invite negotiation over your boundaries. You dilute your conviction with unnecessary words. But when you say what needs to be said and stop the silence that follows becomes your proof. It tells the world, I meant what I said. And people feel that more deeply than any extended argument ever could. The ancient Stoics understood this. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. Explanation feeds noise. Action breeds respect. The moment you stop explaining, you force others to experience you instead of evaluate you. They can no longer control you through misunderstanding. You stand still, grounded, calm, and suddenly their questions lose power. Silence is not weakness. It's focus. It's the discipline of a man who no longer needs to manage perception. Because the truth doesn't need to shout, it simply exists. When you stop explaining, you create mystery. When you stop defending, you reveal authority. That's when the world shifts from testing you to trusting you. Not because you convinced them, but because your calm made them believe you already knew. When you stop explaining yourself, people start listening differently. Your silence becomes a mirror. They project their own meaning onto it. Some will call you confident. Others will call you cold. But neither interpretation matters, because you've detached your peace from their perception. That's the quiet power of presence. You no longer need agreement to validate direction. Most men over-explain because they fear being misunderstood. But here's the truth. Misunderstanding is a filter, not a failure. The ones who truly align with your energy won't need an essay to feel your intent. They'll sense it in your tone, in your posture, in your restraint. Those who demand constant clarification were never meant to understand you. They were meant to reveal where your boundaries leak. Stoic man doesn't correct every misconception. He lets time do the explaining. Because clarity revealed through action lasts longer than any defense delivered through words. You can tell the world who you are, or you can show them through how you carry silence under pressure. The latter always speaks louder. In a culture addicted to noise, your restraint becomes magnetic. It shows you trust yourself enough not to fill every gap. And that unsettles people, not because you're rude, but because you're rare. You've stopped auditioning for respect. You've started embodying it. When you stop explaining, you communicate something deeper than words ever could. I'm at peace with being misunderstood. And that single truth shifts everything. Because peace is the one thing control can't touch, and misunderstanding can't shake. It's the foundation of all real power, the calm beneath the storm, the certainty that doesn't need applause to exist. Think about the moments when you felt the urge to explain yourself, the most after someone questioned your motives, doubted your choices, or misunderstood your silence. That impulse to explain isn't just about communication. It's about fear. Fear of losing control over how you're seen. But control built on approval is an illusion. The more you try to manage perception, the further you drift from authenticity. The Stoic man understands this truth. Peace doesn't live in being liked. It lives in being clear within. He knows his intentions. He knows his path. He doesn't need the world's understanding to continue walking it. That's why his silence feels powerful. It's not empty. It's centered. Every word he doesn't say is a reflection of his discipline. There's a difference between explaining and expressing. Explanation seeks validation. Expression releases truth. When you express, you speak once with clarity, and then you detach. You don't chase reassurance. You don't repackage your truth to make it more digestible. You stand behind it. Women, friends, even the world, they all start to respond differently when you embody this energy. They feel your boundaries without you declaring them. They sense that your calm isn't passive, it's chosen. You become the man who doesn't need to argue his worth, because his actions already prove it. And that's the quiet paradox. The less you chase understanding, the more people want to understand you. The more you rest in stillness, the more your presence fills the room. Not through noise, not through justification, but through the unshakable weight of a man who trusts his truth, even when no one else does. The moment you stop explaining yourself, something powerful happens. Your energy recalibrates. You stop leaking power through unnecessary words and start storing it in your presence. Most people can't handle that kind of stillness. They'll try to provoke a reaction, ask you to justify, to open up, to communicate better. But what they really want is access to your certainty, to your calm, to your control. A Stoic man doesn't give that away freely. He knows that explanation is often a transaction, an emotional trade that costs more than it returns. So he chooses his silence carefully, not out of arrogance, but out of wisdom. He's learned that when you try to explain yourself to someone who isn't ready to understand, you don't build connection, you build exhaustion. The power of restraint lies in knowing your truth doesn't need translation. If someone misreads you, let them. The truth doesn't need defenders. It needs time. Because time always reveals who is pretending to listen and who is meant to understand. Your silence becomes a filter. The ones who truly align will feel your intent without a speech. The rest will fade, confused by a strength they can't define. That's how a man grows into calm authority, not through constant explanation, but through consistent alignment. Understand this. People will doubt what you say, but they'll believe what you embody. The calm man, the silent man, the grounded man, he doesn't explain because his presence already answers. Every pause, every breath, every steady look carries meaning. You stop trying to convince the world and start teaching it through stillness. And when your silence speaks louder than their noise, that's when you finally realize you were never misunderstood. You were just becoming someone they could no longer interpret. When you stop explaining yourself, you begin to see how little of life requires defense. The world doesn't reward noise, it respects presence. You learn that silence isn't about shutting people out, it's about letting truth breathe without interruption. You no longer rush to prove your worth. You embody it. You no longer chase understanding. You attract it through consistency. That's when people start to notice something different about you. They can't quite name it, but they feel it: the calm, the certainty, the absence of need. You don't talk over others to prove you're right. You don't justify why you walked away. You don't send long messages explaining what they should have already understood. You simply move with quiet conviction. That's power, because real confidence doesn't demand to be seen. It allows others to realize it on their own time. The Stoic man doesn't argue for respect. He lives in a way that makes it the only response possible. And in a world full of noise, his silence echoes the loudest. Remember this. Explanation seeks to control how others think of you. Silence accepts who you already are. The first drains you. The second frees you. When you choose silence over explanation, you're not being distant, you're being deliberate. You're showing that your peace is no longer up for negotiation. So speak when it adds value. Stay silent when it protects your energy. And let your presence say everything words never could. Because the man who no longer needs to explain himself has finally learned what it means to be understood without speaking at all.